The quiet suburban street looked completely normal that morning, with sunlight falling gently across the front lawns and children preparing for school as neighbors moved about their daily routines. But one question would soon haunt everyone on that block. If nothing went wrong, why did a woman disappear in the middle of a normal morning? A silver sedan sat quietly in the Mercer driveway. The driver door was slightly open, and inside the house, something felt unfinished. 8:12 a.m., Brookdale, Texas. Neighbors would later say the morning felt ordinary. Dogs barking, school buses passing, coffee brewing in nearby kitchens. But 20 minutes later, Officer Curtis Bell would step into a home that no longer made sense. Because Natalie Mercer, a woman who never missed work, never ignored calls, never vanished without explanation, had simply stopped existing inside her own routine. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter. Her purse hung neatly by the door. Her car keys were missing. And yet, her car never left the driveway. But one detail didn't add up. When Officer Bell walked through the living room, nothing looked disturbed. No broken furniture. No forced entry. No sign of panic. Just quiet. Too quiet. Moments later, her husband Dylan Mercer stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching silently as police moved through the house. He spoke calmly, said he had already left for work hours earlier, said Natalie must have stepped out, but something about the timeline felt off. Main husband Dylan Mercer, because at 7:43 a.m., someone in the neighborhood reported hearing a car door slam, and according to Dylan, he was already miles away by then. Detective Brandon Holt would later say something about that morning never felt right. Not the house, not the silence, and especially not the husband who seemed too prepared for every question. But the real problem, the tiny detail that would unravel everything, had already been left behind, hidden in plain sight, a mistake so small, no one noticed it yet. But once detectives saw it, the perfect murder would collapse, and the quiet street that looked so normal that morning would become the center of a murder investigation. 3 hours later, detectives arrive, because Natalie Mercer hadn't simply vanished. Someone inside that house knew exactly what happened. The only question left was, who made the mistake that exposed it? And once investigators started digging into Dylan Mercer's morning, the story he told began to crack. Just slightly, but enough to change everything. If Dylan Mercer left for work early that morning, why did his car never pass the neighborhood exit camera? Sunlight poured through the Mercer kitchen window as detectives stepped back inside the quiet house. Coffee still sat in the mug on the counter, cold, untouched. Natalie Mercer had clearly started her morning, but she had never finished it. Detectives arrive 11:26 a.m. Detective Brandon Holt walked slowly through the hallway. Nothing broken, nothing stolen, no struggle, but something about the silence felt staged, like a moment that had been carefully reset. Across the room, Detective Alicia Navarro studied the timeline. Natalie's phone activity stopped at 7:41 a.m. No messages, no calls, no movement afterward, just silence. Last phone activity, 7:41 a.m. Meanwhile, Dylan Mercer's story sounded simple. He said he left for work around 7:30 a.m. Said Natalie was still inside getting ready. Said everything felt normal. But the neighborhood entrance camera told a different story. At 7:43 a.m., no silver sedan left the street. No car resembling Dylan's passed the exit. Nothing. Camera footage. No vehicle leaving. Detective Holt leaned back in his chair later that afternoon. If Dylan had truly left when he claimed, his car would have appeared on that camera. But it didn't. And that tiny gap, just 13 minutes, was the first crack in what looked like a perfect story, because someone was lying about that morning. And the deeper detectives looked, the more carefully planned everything started to feel. Almost perfect. Almost. But perfect plans don't usually leave traces. And inside the Mercer home, investigators were about to notice something small, something ordinary, something that shouldn't have been there at all. But one small detail changed everything. If Natalie Mercer never left the house, why were her car keys gone? Morning light still filled the Mercer kitchen when detectives returned for a second search. Everything looked orderly. Too orderly. Natalie's purse still hung beside the door. Her wallet was inside. But the small hook where she usually left her keys was empty. Missing item: car keys. Detective Alicia Navarro paused. If Natalie planned to leave, the car would be gone. But the silver sedan still sat quietly in the driveway. Doors locked. Engine cold. Which meant one strange possibility. Someone had taken the keys without moving the car. But why take the keys? Across the house, Detective Brandon Holt studied the back hallway. That was when he noticed something unusual. Not damage. Not chaos. Just a faint mark across the floor near the laundry room. A thin scrape line, stretching a few feet, like something heavy had been moved, then quickly put back. But one detail didn't add up. Holt crouched down, staring at the mark, because that hallway led to the garage, and the garage led directly to the driveway. The same driveway where Dylan Mercer's car had supposedly left for work hours earlier. Except the camera said it never did, which raised a darker question. What if Dylan never left that morning at all? What if he stayed inside the house, long after Natalie Mercer's phone went silent? And if that was true, then the quiet home wasn't just the last place Natalie had been seen. It was the last place anything about her had been normal. Because investigators were beginning to realize something chilling. Natalie Mercer didn't disappear outside. She disappeared inside her own home. And whatever happened next, someone in that house had tried very hard to hide it. If Dylan Mercer stayed home, what was he doing in the garage that morning? The garage smelled faintly of oil and fresh-cut wood. Tools were neatly arranged, almost too neat. A single shoe sat in the corner. Main suspect, Dylan Mercer. Detective Holt crouched near the workbench and noticed smudged fingerprints on a small metal box. Not obvious. Not dramatic. Just misplaced. 3 days later, forensics called in. Inside the box, a single item caught Alicia Navarro's eye. A tiny piece of fabric, bloodied, barely visible. Her stomach sank. Because the blood type matched. Natalie Mercer. Evidence found: blood sample. Dylan Mercer's calm facade began to crack under questioning. He claimed he didn't know how the fabric got there. But the timeline didn't fit. The camera still showed his car hadn't left. The phone still showed Natalie's last ping at 7:41 a.m. And now, forensic evidence silently screamed. Someone inside the house had done something unimaginable. But one small mistake exposed everything. The quiet suburban home, perfect and orderly that morning, was no longer safe. Not for investigators. Not for Dylan. And certainly not for anyone who thought they knew what happened in the Mercer house. Who moved the evidence? If Dylan Mercer left for work that morning, why was his car still in the driveway hours later? Detectives sat across from Dylan Mercer in a quiet interview room. Bright lights. Plain table. No distractions. Dylan kept repeating the same sentence. I left for work. Detective Alicia Navarro slid a printed photo across the table. Dylan's silver sedan. Still parked outside his house that morning. Exactly where officers first saw it. Dylan stared at the image. Silent. Driveway photo, 8:12 a.m. Then Detective Brandon Holt spoke calmly. If you left for work, why was your car still there? For the first time since the investigation began, Dylan hesitated. Just a second. But detectives noticed. Because another piece of evidence had just arrived. New timeline evidence. Dylan's workplace used badge scanners for every employee entering the building. The records were clear. On the morning Natalie Mercer disappeared, Dylan Mercer never scanned into work. Not once. Which meant the story he repeated again and again was impossible. Because if he never arrived at work, then he never left the house. And that meant something far darker. The last person inside the Mercer home with Natalie Mercer was the same man now sitting across from detectives. And suddenly the perfect plan was breaking apart. Not because of one huge mistake, But because the truth kept appearing in places Dylan Mercer never expected investigators to look. If Dylan Mercer stayed inside the house that morning, what was he trying so hard to hide? Detectives returned to the Mercer home with a warrant. This time, nothing was rushed. Every room, every corner, every surface, slowly examined. In the garage, Detective Alicia Navarro paused near the concrete floor. Something faint caught her eye. Not obvious, just a pale stain that had been scrubbed too aggressively, like someone tried to erase a moment. Forensic test applied. Moments later, the forensic solution touched the surface, and the floor reacted. A deep blue glow spread across the concrete. Blood. More than a few drops. Far more. Blood detected, garage floor. Detective Brandon Holt stared quietly at the glowing pattern, because it told a story the house had been hiding. Natalie Mercer hadn't walked away. Something violent happened in that garage, and someone had tried to clean it. But cleaning removes the visible. It doesn't erase the truth. By the time detectives finished documenting the scene, one fact had become unavoidable. The disappearance was no longer a mystery. It was a homicide, and the evidence pointed back to the same person who claimed nothing happened that morning, Dylan Mercer. But the most chilling discovery was still coming, because investigators were about to learn why everything happened. And the reason would shock everyone who believed this was a perfect marriage. If Dylan Mercer planned the perfect crime, how did the truth turn the tables on him? Evidence stacked up. Blood traces, missing timeline, scraped floors, and every lie Dylan Mercer told fell apart under questioning. Case closed, Brookdale, Texas. But the courtroom shocked everyone. Dylan Mercer sat silently as the verdict was read. Natalie Mercer, the wife everyone thought was missing, had actually orchestrated the plan. The investigation revealed she manipulated timelines, planted false evidence, and turned the crime against her husband. The jury didn't hesitate. She was convicted, sentenced to prison for her actions. Sentence delivered, life in prison. Detective Holt whispered to Navarro as they left the courthouse. The perfect plan. Only perfect until someone notices the smallest detail. The quiet suburban street that morning would never feel normal again. Subscribe to The Veil of Secret for more chilling true crime stories. Because sometimes the person you trust most is the one who hides the darkest secret.